Hello every pony and welcome to Brony FanFics. Today, Pinkie Watches Paint Dry. Now I didn't find this one featured on Equestria Daily, I actually just saw it across the FIM fiction thing while I was looking at A Drop of Sunlight by the Becoming a Sunbrandisher. And I just thought, Pinkie Watches Paint Dry, that sounds like an interesting random fanfiction that I'd like to read. So yeah, let's get this started. Let's just load it up. So, Pinkie Watches Paint Dry by AbosluteAnonymous. The room had been orange, and now it was not. Pinkie couldn't wrap her head around it. How very, very easy it was to change the identity of a thing, simply by changing its colour, whether it was willing to be changed or not. What had once been the orange room was soon to be the pink room. It was simply a matter of waiting for the paint to dry. There was nothing the walls could do about it, either. They could not say in the matter. And she had been the one to do it to them. She had been the one to steal the room's very identity. After all, once upon a time, her loft at Sugar Cube Corner had been painted orange. It had been the orange room. Now it was not. Soon it was going to be pink, and then it would be the pink room. And all the memories of the orange room would fade into obscurity with time. What had once been defined by its uniqueness was being assimilated, falling into place along with everything else. After all, everything she owned was pink, and soon her bedroom would be no different. What did that say about the fleetingness of the individual when something as simple as a can of paint could change the very nature of a thing? When the mere colour and could change what a thing was at its very core? For a room that was no longer orange could no longer be called the orange room. The room was becoming something else entirely. Even if she painted over it once the pink had dried, in order to try and recapture the orange, she was quickly finding herself missing. It would never again be simply the orange room. Instead, it would be forever known as the room that had once been orange and then was pink and now was orange again. And Pinkie Pie didn't know if she'd be able to remember that a name that long. Even the acronym. You know what the acronym for that is. Trithan Obatwapanwo was too long for her liking, and she doubted whether even her sharp mind would be able to keep track of that many letters. She stood in the middle of the room, her coat and mane covered in flecks of the stuff lying off to the side, abandoned and forgotten. There were 2 now empty cans of paint and a pair of brushes. Her furniture had been covered in protective tarps, but there had been nothing in place to protect those poor walls. Perhaps Pinkie mused, because painting the walls had been the entire point of the exercise in the first place. Pinkie took a step forward, hoof outstretched, and placed it gently against the closest wall. The paint was still damp, having not yet dried enough for it to be permanent. And that meant that the orange room was now in limbo. No longer orange, true, but not entirely pink either. That could still be changed. And that meant that the choice was hers. Did she let fate run its course? Was it more merciful to end its transformation now, removing the paint while it was still wet and hopefully easier to do so? Or would it be kinder to see the process through, uninterrupted, and allow her precious bedroom to become what it would inevitably become? Pink, like everything else she possessed? Was it too late? Had the damage already been done? Was such a change irrevocable, seeping into the very nature of the walls themselves? Perhaps the walls no longer viewed themselves as orange walls. Perhaps they accepted their destiny as pink walls, and would resent her for altering them further. Pinkie wanted to make amends, but she didn't know how. She didn't know how to make it up to the poor walls. After all, she had nearly changed them too much, had already stripped them of their identities. If she went any further, what would become of them? If paint had such power, then what could it do to her? Wide eyes, Pinkie examined her hoof, bright pink like the rest of her, but now it was streaked with pink paint as well. If paint had changed the essence of a thing, what would it have done to her if the paint had been green or blue or burnt sienna instead of pink? It had been a fortunate coincidence that she happened to be her own favourite colour, or she would forever be grateful for. What she would forever be grateful for. But if she hadn't been the case, she couldn't even begin to imagine what it would have meant. If the paint had been any other colour, then accidentally becoming covered in it would have changed her, just as the walls had been changed. She wouldn't have been Pinkie Pie covered in pink paint polka dotties. She would have been a blue polka dotted almost Pinkie, but not quite. She wouldn't have been a proper Pinkie at all. And if she'd been stained in blue, and if she wasn't necessarily a Pinkie, if that wasn't a static thing, and if it wasn't so easy to change, then who was she? If she wasn't a full-blooded Pinkie Pie, then she didn't know who she was at all. She certainly couldn't be a bluey or a greeny or a burnt sienna-y. She had been a Pinkie all her life. After all, she was exceptionally good at it. Being a Pinkie Pie was all she'd ever known. All she could trust herself with. All she wanted. She couldn't bear the thought of some kind of forced change claiming her identity. But wasn't that what she herself had done to the Orange Room? She had taken it upon herself to change it, potentially against its will. For the better, she had believed at all time. But now she was regretting it. But perhaps all she'd done was steal its identity and force a new one upon it. The Orange Room was no longer the Orange Room. Pinkie Pie might no longer be Pinkie. All it took to change a thing was a simple can of paint. Almost hesitantly, she once again touched the drying pink paint, only to find it was no longer wet to the touch. It was too late then. The deed had been done, and the Orange Room was gone forever. In its place, there was nothing but pink. See, I told you she was being weird. How long she'd been standing there? Rainbow Dash and Twilight Sparkle stood in the entrance of Pinkie Pie's bedroom, watching her in wide-eyed fascination. Well, Twilight was. Rainbow was scowling. I dunno, almost an hour, I guess? She wanted to paint her room, so I said I'd help. And we'd started painting, then suddenly she started just staring at the wall, looking scared and saying stuff like, "What have I done? What have I done? I'm so sorry," and acting all crazy, and then she started doing this. Are you sure she isn't just being Pinkie Pie? Twilight ventured. From her perspective, all she could see was the pink pony standing perfectly still in the middle of her room, a glazed look in her face, as though she were deeply lost in thought. That would have been alarming enough under ordinary circumstances, but with Pinkie it was especially so. Pinkie Pie wasn't exactly the kind of pony prone to bouts of deep philosophical thought, and the unicorn had to acknowledge that seeing her in the midst of such contemplation was a tad worrisome. Pinkie Pie doesn't act crazy like this. Pinkie Pie acts crazy by jumping around and talking about random stuff. Since when does she get all moody? There was a brief silence while the two of them watched their friend continue to stand perfectly still. "Just you wait. Her hair's going to go flat and she'll start talking to rocks any second now," Rainbow Dash muttered, rather darkly after a moment of this. Why was she apologising? I have no idea. Once she started crying after eating a cupcake because she missed it, maybe she feels bad about painting the walls. That's silly. "So what do we do?" Dash asked, again peering through the doorway at a stoically tragic figure of the mournful Pinkie Pie, alone except for the alligator absently gumming on her tail with her vacant eyes. I'm not sure," Twilight confessed, scratching her head and frowning. She liked to believe that she was rather intelligent, but even she had to confess that Pinkie was an enigma. No pony ever knew why she did the things she did, let alone how to make her stop. If Pinkie Pie had decided to stop being a whirlwind of pure energy and instead fall into some strange state of melancholy, who was she to judge? It looks like she's just having some kind of overly introspective internal monologue, but I can't really tell. What kind of egghead are you? Aren't you supposed to be good at fixing this kind of thing? Twilight shrugged helplessly, and Rainbow Dash rolled her eyes before stomping away. She could have easily flown down the stairs, but she seemed determined to make as much noise as possible in order to emphasise just how fed up she was. For a moment or two, Twilight remained in the door, watching her friend somewhat curiously. She was yet to solve the puzzle of Pinkie's existence, and this was just another mystery regarding her strange friend. She wasn't entirely clear on why Rainbow Dash had come to her for help, but the egghead comment made her suspect that the Pegasus had thought she'd know a spell to snap Pinkie out of this unprecedented lucidity or something. But the stupor the pink pony was in was almost hypnotic. Seeing the normally spastic baker so subdued for once had a strangely relaxing effect, and Twilight almost didn't want it to end. Truth be told, it was peaceful. She was a murderer. At least if Orange Room had been an actual pony instead of a studio apartment, his blood would have been on her hooves as a result of what she'd done to him. Only in this case, it wasn't blood; it was pain. Actually, maybe that didn't work. If she had stripped the old orange paint rather than just paint over it, then that old paint might have been the blood of the room, and then the metaphor would have worked. Since the paint on her hooves was new paint, it was more likely she'd given Orange Room new blood, rather than shedding his old blood. So instead of murdering him, it was like Pinkie Pie had given him too much life, and it overwhelmed him. Yes, that was it. Rainbow Dash barreled past Twilight Sparkle and into the freshly painted room, knocking inside Gummy, the alligator, so that she could shove a cupcake into Pinkie's face. "Cupcake!" she said fiercely. "Look at the cupcake! Eat the cupcake!" For a moment, Pinkie looked startled just to see Rainbow Dash in front of her, a dazed look on her face, and then her eyes fell on the cupcake. With a squeal of joy, she yanked it from the Pegasus and shoved it in her mouth. In pleasure and licking her lips. "Wow, thanks, Rainbow Dash!" she cried. "That was yummy! I haven't had a cupcake in like forever! I totally needed that one!" Rainbow Dash grinned, looking triumphant. "Mr. and Mrs. Cake said that you get like this sometimes when you don't have enough sugar, and all it takes to snap you out of it is a cupcake." She explained with satisfaction. "See you good now? Back to normal?" "Yeah, huh? Thanks again for the cupcake." Pinkie cried through a mouthful of pastry, beaming. "Red velvet is my favouriteest flavour right now." That is a huge coincidence. Or maybe, I don't know, did Ganon actually know that red velvet was a flavour? I don't know. Anyway, red velvet is my favouriteest flavour right now. Oh my gosh, it is so good. You should eat one too. "Yep, back to normal," Rainbow Dash declared, clapping Pinkie on the shoulder and with a wing and steering her towards the door. "Come on, I think the paint fumes are getting to me. Too. Let's go make Tank and Gummy rustle or something." "Yay!" And so the two friends left, chatting comfortably as they waltzed past Twilight, as thought they'd forgotten the unicorn was even there. With a sigh, she turned to follow them out. Maybe, Pinkie thought, munching on the unexpected cupcake, maybe that's what life was all about, in the end. Accepting loss and change and finding a way to work around it and move on. Maybe life was about not letting the tragedies bog you down and cause you to forget the little things that made life truly shine. Maybe life was about the small pleasures, those tiny instances of joy, and not so much about the bad things. Maybe it was about the true secret to true happiness. And so Pinkie exited the formerly Orange Room with no regrets, not looking back even once, instead choosing to look forwards, to the future, to friends, to delicious, tasty cupcakes, with sprinkles. Seeing an expression of beatific enlightenment on Pinkie Pie's face, Rainbow Dash rolled her eyes and sighed. "You're so weird," she muttered. Right, that's Pinkie Watches Paint Dry by AbosluteAnonymous. That was interesting, to say the least. I was expecting a bit more random, but I'll go with philosophical enlightenment, which, at the end of the day, we all need a little bit of. That's why I took 2 years of philosophy and ethics, and so far a year of psychology. But anyway, thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed that. I know I most definitely did. As always, keep on spreading the magic of friendship, and I will see you next time.